Hello everybody, in this tutorial I wanted to share with you a few fun variations of some different stitches that are great for borders. I am using this lovely Stuart Morris Textiles crewel yarn and it's hand dyed. You can get it on Etsy and I will link it below if you'd like to purchase it and follow along. I am going to start by tying a knot at the end of my thread. I am doubling up this thread to use it. And if you're using crewel wool, the easiest way to thread a needle is to fold the yarn over the needle and pull it tight. And then with your fingers pinched around it, you can just thread it that way. It makes it way easier to thread it. The first stitch that I'll be doing is called the knotted purl stitch. Come up ever so slightly above the line you intend to stitch, and then come back down with your needle and thread directly on top of the line. Now you're going to come up directly below the line, and you're going to place your needle underneath that first little stitch and over the working thread. And I'm sorry, my hand kind of got in the way for that first stitch, but I will show you a close-up in the following footage. You're going to go back down underneath that stitch yet again and over the working thread and pull through. Now, as you can see, a little knot will form, and then you'll move on to the next stitch, so you'll skip a little bit of space and then go back down slightly above the working line. This time you're going to go up underneath the working line. You're not going to be making any more stitches directly on top of it. It was just for the initial stitch. And then you'll work the stitch the same by going down through that little leg and then going down through it again. And here's a little bit more of a close-up view so you can see what's going on. The stitch can be a little bit confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's very fun and easy to do. Next, we're going to combine this stitch with a Pekinese stitch. So you're going to come up with a contrasting thread color underneath of the line, and then you're going to place your needle and thread in between the first and second stitch. Then you're going to place your needle and thread underneath the bottom of the first stitch in that little leg and pull through. Next, you'll proceed to the next open space in between the two stitches. And then this time you'll just go in between the first two stitches that you went through the first time. Then you'll just continue repeating down the line and you'll just have these little loops that will form. I think this adds a lot of extra detail, a little bit of extra color to the stitch, and I think it looks very fun. To finish the line of stitches, you'll do similar to how you started it. You'll go up under the little leg on the left side, and then you'll just end it by going through the last two stitches. And then you can basically just place your needle and thread back down through the fabric, kind of behind those stitches to hide it. The next stitch is called a heavy chain stitch, and then I'm also going to combine it with some buttonhole scallops. This stitch is easiest to work vertically, so I have flipped the hoop around and I'm going to make a very small stitch at the very top of the line. Skip a stitch length and come up through the fabric. Place your needle underneath of the first little stitch, and then you're going to come back down through the same hole that working thread is going up through. As you can see, you have made a reverse chain stitch. You're going to skip a little bit of space again, coming up through the fabric on that line, and then you're going to go back underneath of that first tiny little stitch at the top. Again, you're going to come back down where your working thread is coming up through, and you guessed it, you're going to repeat this again This time you're going to go up through the little chain that formed and not the small stitch. The rest of this stitch is going to be worked underneath of the chain above it, and you'll see as I work down the line how you do it. This is of course in the chain stitch family, and it just makes a thicker, more full looking stitch, and it's great for a thicker border. To make a buttonhole scallop, you're going to make one long stitch underneath of this stitch. You're going to leave it kind of in a U shape, and I like to use a temporary needle or a pin to hold it in place while I make this stitch. Come up along the left side of the stitch with your needle and thread, and then you're going to make a small stitch underneath of the U shape and then over your working thread, and then a small loop should form, and then you'll move on to the next stitch, again leaving the working thread underneath of the needle as you go, and you'll just make these small stitches along the line. Once you hit the spot where the needle is, I normally will take the needle out. It's usually secure enough at this point that you can just take the needle off and work the rest of the stitch. Once you've reached the end of the line, you can just end your stitch by going down into the fabric at the base of that little U shape. This next border stitch will start with just a standard chain stitch. Come up through the fabric and then down directly through where you came up, and you'll make a little loop and move a stitch length ahead, catching that little loop with your needle. Then you will place your needle back down again where the working thread is and catch the next loop, and these will form little chains along the line. As you can see, for this particular stitch I am using one strand at a time. I just figured the chain stitches would look a little bit neater this way, and we're going to be interlacing another color through them, so it just makes it a lot easier. You're going to come up at the very end of the chain with a contrasting color. You're going to skip one chain and then go underneath the right side of the chain stitch. This stitch is probably easiest worked with a tapestry needle. I'm using a sharp needle and it's a little bit tricky. You're going to come under the first chain stitch from the left side and underneath of the working thread, and you'll start to see a little loop form. And then you're going to repeat this all the way down the line. So you're going to skip another chain and go underneath the right side of the next chain stitch with your needle and thread. And then you will come up underneath the one you skipped on the right side, going from left to right. Try to keep your working thread a little bit loose with this one. If you pull it too tight, the loops start to lose their definition. Then you can leave it like this, but I'm going to do it on the other side as well. So you'll just skip the first chain, and then you're going to go through the left side of the second chain, and then go back up through the first chain from right to left this time. And you'll just repeat this all the way down the chain. This next stitch is called the coral stitch, and it forms little knots along a line. Come up along the line and pull your working thread to the left hand side. Place your needle slightly above that line of thread. You'll begin to pull through the thread, and you're going to catch the little loop. The thread at this point should be crisscrossed. You're going to come up with your needle directly to the left of where the threads are crossing and gently pull through, and a little knot will form. Then you're gonna skip a little bit ahead and do that again. So you're gonna go up above the working thread, keep the loop and crisscross threads together, and then go up through the fabric with your needle, catching it. To make this a little bit more fun, I'm going to use a contrasting color and I'm going to do a whip stitch. Come up at the base of the line and then you're going to take your needle and thread and place it underneath the first stitch. Pull through and then you're going to take your thread to the right and then you're going to go again underneath. So the whole time you're going to be working from right to left when you whip these stitches underneath of the stitches on the fabric. You'll start to see a little bit of a twist around the stitches form, and it's just a fun way to add a little bit of extra something to a border. This next stitch is called a twisted chain stitch, and it's set up a little bit different than a regular chain stitch. You're going to come up through the fabric, but then instead of going down through the same hole, you're going to go off to underneath of that stitch a little bit, and then you're going to catch the loop, and the legs should be kind of twisted this way. To work the next stitch, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to go off to slightly below where the working thread is and catch the loop that forms. Next, I'm going to make some bullion loops. These are easiest to use milliner's needles with. I did not have any, so as you can see, I had a little bit of trouble with this. You'll come up through the fabric and then you're going to go back down in the same hole. Catch a little bit of the fabric with your needle, and then you can keep the needle kind of in the fabric and twist the thread around it. Pinch the thread and then you're going to pull it through, and there should be a line of little twists. You'll have to use your thumb and kind of push up on it to make it into a little loop. I just did one of these bullion loops along each of the twisted chain stitches to add a little extra decoration to them. I think they kind of look like little flower buds. This next stitch is called the fly stitch. I'm going to be working them side by side along a line. So you're going to come up on the line and skip some space and place your needle down through the fabric, and then you're going to go back up in the center in between those two stitches you made. Make a little anchor stitch on top of the stitch, and that's your first fly stitch. Like I said, I'm just going to work these down along the line, and then I'm going to add a buttonhole stitch underneath of it. To make a buttonhole stitch, you're going to come up at the base of one of the fly stitches, and then in the center of the stitch, right underneath of it, I made a stitch. Then I came up directly below along the line that I want to work, and I caught the little loop, and you see there's like a little backwards L that forms. Then I came up at the base of the fly stitch and again worked another blanket stitch. I worked a blanket stitch along the left-hand side, middle, and right side of each of the fly stitches, as you can see. The final stitch I wanted to share with you is called an interlaced lazy daisy stitch. Lazy daisies are essentially just detached chain stitches or a singular chain stitch, and I made these stitches to fan out along the line, above the line, and then I made a grouping of them fanning out below the line, and I tried to make sure to include the steps on how I did this. I spaced them out so there should be 5 per flower, and each flower kind of shares one petal. You'll see in just a second. The last petal should land along the working line, and then the next flower that fans out underneath of the line will basically share that petal. come up underneath of the petal to the right and make a little whip stitch around it. And then you're gonna come up from above and then go down through the petal in the next groupings of flowers. You'll again make a little whip stitch around that petal, and then you'll move on to the next petal. Again, you'll go up through and then make a little whip stitch around it. So you're basically just interlacing and whip stitching around the petals that lay on the line. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas of things you can do for creative borders. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.